Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we're going to talk about the Bernie Sanders 2020 presidential campaign and how they recently got caught not paying their staffers the $15 minimum wage, which they're trying to push on all of the country. Recently, the Bernie Sanders 2020 presidential campaign was hit with a huge blow as it was revealed that the Democratic Socialist senator was actually not practicing what he preaches. Hypocrisy has become all too common for the Democrats this campaign season too, but this recent error really flies in the face of everything Bernie Sanders is about. Some even say this blunder could completely end Bernie's campaign too. And I have to say myself, I think I agree with that too, but if we're being honest, Bernie was never going to become the Democratic nominee in the first place. If that was going to happen, he would have been nominated back in 2016, when he was clearly beating Hillary Clinton in both popularity and messaging and policy. But regardless of Bernie being ahead back then, the Democrats gave their nomination to Hillary Clinton anyway, which was basically cheating, and it's common knowledge now that Sanders was the one who should have been nominated. In the end, we all know how 2016 turned out anyway. Trump won, of course, thank God. And I doubt Bernie could have beat Trump if he was even nominated anyway, but he certainly would have had a better shot than Hillary. Now we're 4 years later, and frankly, Bernie Sanders doesn't have a chance to win at all. He's still got some vocal and excited supporters out there, sure, but he has nowhere near the spark and grassroots hold that he had once before. Quite frankly, I'm surprised Bernie even tried running again. The Democrats stole it from him before, so of course they're going to steal it from him again now, especially considering Bernie is even less popular and has even less of a chance to win this election. Not only is Bernie's own popularity waning, he's also got to deal with Trump being an incumbent, whose political power and support is growing little by little each and every day. Meanwhile, Sanders' influence is slowly fading each day, and he's clearly getting older and more desperate since the last campaign. Bernie is certainly a broken man now, and a shadow of his former self. That's why he's been forced to scramble more here and say more stupid, outrageous SJW bullshit. And also, Sanders has been forced to cut corners and do more underhanded, off-message things. Shady things that now appear to be bringing about his downfall, before the Democratic establishment even has a chance to cheat him once again. This time we're talking about the $15 minimum wage issue and policy which Democrats like Bernie Sanders are in strong support of. Never mind the fact that artificially raising wages will inevitably raise prices and or lower the value of the US dollar, but that's pretty much besides the point by now. The point here today is Democrats want a $15 minimum wage, clearly. Some radicals even raising that to $20 an hour too. Not kidding. Rashida Tlaib said that she wanted $20 an hour just this week. But let's stay focused on Bernie and his $15 an hour for the sake of this story today. Bernie, along with every Democrat and their mother, they're pushing for this new $15 minimum wage. And Bernie's been strongly for it, especially. The problem here is, though, Bernie's staff has heard him preaching about this $15 an hour wage that he's been selling to the nation. And his staff thought, hey, shouldn't we be getting that too? That's right. Bernie wants to impose a $15 minimum wage, which he won't even give his own employees on his own campaign. Talk about being hypocritical, and talk about being stupid and having bad optics. For more details on this story, let's go ahead and check out a Bloomberg article called Sanders White House Campaign Hit with Federal Labor Complaint. Ouch, this should be good. Let's go ahead and read on. Senator Bernie Sanders' 2020 presidential campaign has been hit with an unfair labor practice complaint, alleging illegal employee interrogation and retaliation against staffers. The July 19 complaint to the National Labor Relations Board, filed by an unnamed individual in Indiana, was posted to the agency's website late July 22nd. It comes as tense negotiations between the Sanders campaign and the union representing staffers recently boiled over publicly. The Washington Post reported July 23rd that unionized organizers for the campaign had won a pay raise and reached a compromise to reduce the hours of some workers. A copy of the charge has not yet been made public, but the agency's July 22nd docket lists 5 potential violations of the National Labor Relations Act. The charge also alleges that the campaign unlawfully discharged an employee, modified a labor contract, and engaged in illegal discipline. Uh-oh, yikes. What a blow to this Bernie Sanders guy and his potential campaign. Keep in mind too, this guy is a self-proclaimed socialist, so being pro-labor, pro-unions, and pro-workers is a big part of that. But by the looks of things, Bernie is socialist in name only, meaning he's just going to promise to be that and offer people higher rates and more benefits and free stuff if they vote for him. But whether or not those promises actually materialize and come to be is a whole other story. I know I won't trust a guy who doesn't offer these same things to his own people. This is pretty much equivalent to being a male feminist. They like to speak out in support of women and their rights publicly, but really, they're just doing that to get attention and to get into the females' good graces. ladies. So later these same grifters can try and hook up with and possibly abuse those ladies in the future. And Bernie is the same kind of hypocrite with his socialism and his $15 minimum wage. Also seems like Sanders is reaping what he sows here, since he's the one making these kinds of suggestions that are now getting him into hot water. And if he would have done this honestly and in a genuine way, Sanders would have already paid his people the minimum wage he is proposing to impose on everyone else. Instead though, he's paying them less, which is a right he has now, but he's also actively campaigning against this right, oddly enough. And to make matters even worse for Byrne, upon being called out, Sanders offered his workers the minimum wage, $15 an hour, sure, but he then swiftly cut their hours so they won't be getting any more money anyway. And this of course is exactly what will happen with other organizations and companies if they were forced to artificially inflate their pay rates like what's being suggested by Democrats and Bernie Sanders. So really, Bernie and his campaign are not only running themselves into the ground, they're also proving why their platforms don't work and why Americans should look elsewhere for their financial advice and policy. Charges to the NLRB can be filed by any person and don't have to come from a campaign staffer or someone directly affected by the alleged labor law violations. According to the board's website, the NLRB has yet to make a determination about whether there is any merit to the allegations. News of potential labor unrest within the Sanders campaign has emboldened critics of the union-aligned lawmaker. Sanders has made worker rights a key part of his platform in the race for the Democratic White House nomination. A representative for the United Food and Commercial Workers, the union representing campaign staffers, declined to comment. Campaign officials did not offer a comment in response to Bloomberg Law's inquiries. So it looks like they're not getting any more specific details here, but we do already know enough to move forward. Bernie is not practicing what he preaches, clearly. If he was, he wouldn't be paying people less than the $15 minimum wage he is proposing for everyone else. And let's also keep in mind, this is not the only instance where Sanders has been hypocritical. Pretty much everything in his life and campaign do not align with the high and lofty socialist pro-union goals he's trying to run on, and eventually he wants to impose on all of us too. For example, Bernie is obviously anti-capitalism, right? He's a hardcore socialist and he wants high taxes on the rich in order to redistribute their wealth to the rest of the nation, theoretically making everyone equals or some bullshit. But at the same time, Bernie is also a multi-millionaire himself who owns multiple houses as well. Bernie has been writing and selling books and getting rich for years, profiting off of the same capitalist system he hopes to destroy one day. Sanders is also paying the lowest and least amount of taxes possible on these large profits and incomes. And that also means he's taking advantage of the same tax breaks he decries publicly each week too. Bernie could pay more in taxes if he wanted to as well. And he could lead by example here, but he clearly doesn't and won't, because when he says he wants to tax the rich, that means he wants to tax rich people that aren't him. And usually he wants to tax people that are conservatives and people he doesn't like. Lastly, let's talk about his hypocrisy about immigration. Bernie Sanders is one of many Democrats who now continue to preach the ludicrous and unsafe idea of having virtually open borders in America. They want to let in all the illegals they can because, of course, Democrats do. That way they can get them hooked on free benefits and socialism and thus getting their votes for generations. But these kinds of hypocrites will never help or take in any illegals themselves. Bernie's got loads of money and multiple giant mansion-sized houses. He could easily afford to take in at least 1, 2, or even 3 or 4 refugees. But once again, like with all these big major campaign issues, Bernie doesn't abide. And that's why after this news story showing he does this same hypocritical bullshit with his most basic and central platform of socialism and being for the working person, well, after this, Sanders might not ever bounce back into relevance ever again. The charge filing will initiate a preliminary investigation by the Labor Board's Indianapolis office to determine if there is merit to the allegations. The board's lawyers will then decide whether to move the case forward or dismiss it. Sanders' campaign staff in March became the first to unionize in a presidential race when workers voted to join the UFCW. The union inked a contract with campaign officials 2 moths later. Not sure how long 2 moths are, but they're pretty small animals, so that was probably done quickly. Sanders, an independent who caucuses with Democrats in the Senate, is scheduled to appear this evening at a union rally for airline catering workers outside of Washington. Bet Bernie is wishing he wasn't so pro-union nowadays. Sure, unions are a good idea in theory, but they're certainly no fun to be a part of in reality. Even worse, unions coming after you is not a good look, and it's not fun to deal with either. But it's really hard to pity Sanders here now. As I said earlier, Bernie Sanders is reaping what he has sowed. Bernie's getting his just desserts, if you will, but they're most likely not going to taste like a sweet and salty banana split sundae. No, Sanders blowing his whole campaign over not paying his workers the wage he's promised to everyone else, that probably tastes more like a real bullshit sandwich, if anything. Yes, to to continue the food analogies here, Bernie's got himself into a real pickle once again. So maybe it's time he bow out of this whole campaign and presidential race already. As I mentioned earlier, Sanders is not only a shadow of his former self now, but also his fan base and supporter enthusiasm is waning day by day. Not to mention, the Democrats cheated him out of the nomination last time, so why the hell would they give it to him now when he's doing even worse than before? What do you guys think? Is Bernie Sanders a big hypocrite? How can a politician like this promise one thing to the entire country, but still not be able to deliver it to his own campaign staffers? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time. One last note before we wrap this up, please consider joining our No Bullshit Patreon page. Your support starting at just $1 a month can really help keep this show afloat. With YouTube and the media attacking conservatives on the daily, it's really time we all chip in and support this show if you want to keep these videos coming and going at full schedule. I really can't make this show without your guys' support, so consider joining our Patreon today, link below in this video's description. Thanks again for your time, and we'll see y'all in the next video.